Coming up in this episode of the Creepy Kingdom Cinema Crypt, we tell you everything you need to know about our latest short film, Georgie. Greetings and welcome to the Creepy Kingdom Cinema Crypt. Creepy Kingdom's podcast all about the spooky side of cinema. I am your host, Mr. James H. Carter II. And this is a very special episode of the Cinema Crypt because here at Creepy Kingdom, we not only talk about films on this particular podcast, we also make them. And on June 10th, 2019, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 12 p.m. Eastern, our latest short film, Georgie, is exclusively premiered online on Fangoria. And on this episode of this podcast, we have the entire executive team on to discuss all things Georgie, the who, what, why, when, and where, and everything ever Georgie, besides actually watching the film, is coming your way right now. All right, welcome to a very, very special episode of the Creepy Kingdom Cinema Crypt. I'm joined by two very, very special guests. If you two would like to introduce yourselves. Who's going to go first?
I'm Ryan Grulick. Master of ceremonies, obviously.
Yes. And what do you do, Ryan Grulick?
I eat tacos and I work on movies, but I directed Georgie.
And I'm John Campopiano. I produced Georgie and co-wrote it with Ryan. I eat more burritos than tacos, but partial to both, and part-time Yeti.
Yeah, part-time Yeti.
Bill Markovitz.
Part-time. I didn't know. I thought you had to choose whether you were Yeti or you weren't. I didn't know.
It's a seasonal hat.
Okay. These are marvelous times we're living in. So, all right. So, Georgie, we've been talking about it. Not even a year, which is actually pretty exciting to think that comes from a seedling of an idea to a full realized concept in less than a year is pretty exciting. But it is our latest short film. And as of the release of this podcast, it is having its online debut on the iconic horror magazine's website, Fangoria. So from seedling of idea to Fangoria in 9 months. How about that?
Yeah. How about that?
How about that? So before we even get into that, so what, for the few people that might have missed it, what is this about? What is this Georgie thing about?
John, you want to get started?
You want me to take it? No, you take it.
ahead.
You take it.
All right.
You take it, director.
Georgie is about Pennywise as trickster returning in the guise of Georgie to wreak havoc on Derry again. That's what it's about.
Okay.
That's what it's about.
And so if the people that are unfamiliar with Pennywise...
Turn off this podcast and go watch it or read a book.
Yeah, take 10 minutes and read the book.
Yeah, just any 10 minutes you got.
All right. It's a 10-minute read. Yeah. So what was the inspiration to have this different take on it?
I think for John and I both, and he can add on whatever he wants, but I think that essentially the opportunity arose from meeting Tony Dakota, who played Georgie alongside Tim Curry in the miniseries we all know and love. And then the development of the story was fairly organic, but the real question was, what can you do with this, right? Because how do you bring people back from the dead? And it was just very, I wouldn't say challenging to come up with the concept because it just kind of flew out, but the idea of what not to do, there were so many ideas of what not to do with this, like, make it a comedy, try to actually, tie it in from, him returning from the grave, that kind of stuff. So that, to me, it was fairly organic to go with this sort of fever dream psychedelia, and the initial noodlings are fairly close to what landed on the final cut.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the challenge, or maybe it wasn't a challenge, maybe it helped give us some direction, is that, if you're familiar with the book or the miniseries or the new film, you're aware of what happens to the character of Georgie. And so there's nothing really ambiguous about that. And I think that was, we initially got a little bit of pushback from some fans that sort of said, well, how can he return? He's dead. And, Ryan and I sort of had to bite our lips and say, well, just wait and see, and the story will make sense and it'll reveal itself to you. And so I think what we ended up going with really felt like really the only way to do it in a serious way. I mean, you could have made it a musical. We could have done it in all kinds, you could have gotten silly with it. But it seemed like, we wanted it to be dark. We wanted it to be serious. Tony was into the idea of it being dark and being serious. And it just felt like the only way to go, really.
Where has my arm gone?
Right. See, we could have done that. I mean, we could have had a barbershop quartet.
Barbershop quartet.
I like riffing. I like because his sarcasm actually translates to pictures in my head, and then I'm like, where has my arm gone?
Tony really brought his chops, man. I think he could have done that, but I just did. It wasn't in the cards this time.
No, not this time. But I totally agree. I think that there's a few layers of unpacking the idea of why do this, and I find myself repeating this statement a lot. But in the end, and I wasn't necessarily consciously aware of it while we were doing it, but in hindsight, what I really see this as is expanding the King mythos very similarly to what writers did, even during with H.P. Lovecraft, even during his life. So he was a living author when other authors started spinning off of his mythos and developing stories around those characters and those scenes and those settings. And then after he died, obviously it became this, overwhelmingly large genre, really. Mm-hmm. And I think that we, for whatever reason, we're doing that with, it wasn't conscious, but now I see that we did it. And it's really interesting because, I think 60, 70, 100 years from now, you'll still see people paying homage to Stephen King by entwining some of those characters and those nods and those stories. I think it kind of transcends fan film and goes into that sort of realm with the way we did it and what its intention was. But I'm still fine with it being called a fan film. But when it comes back to the fans, I think that pushback that John was mentioning was probably, and rightfully so, more around, don't you dare damage these characters or this story that I really like so much. And I hope that we didn't do that. And initial feedback has been that we didn't. And maybe, maybe most people will come out feeling that way. And for me, that's a win, because it is something that you could easily do. You could easily just one of the initial conversations of what not to do was to have Tony come home for Thanksgiving dinner and just be like, hey, I'm back, guys. And like
a sitcom.
Yeah, well, Life with Georgie. Yeah. But it, and that we steered away from anything that remotely resembled that and landed in a place that I think is really foreign and totally unique. And
well, I also think too that it touches on the spirit of what King does with his own writing in the first place, which is that he creates such rich universes with such rich characters that come and go. And I've heard him say in the past that, oftentimes he'll bring a character back like someone from It will show up in the Dark Tower series, and it's because he has said himself, I kind of want to know what this person's up to now, and it's kind of like, I think so that doing Georgie the way we did it sort of is true to the spirit of kind of how he has handled a lot of his own stories, which is sort of weaving those universes together and bringing characters back and seeing what they're up to now and how they've changed and where their lives have gone. And so I think it kind of rings true to some of his style, with how we did Georgie.
Absolutely. And again, with horror fiction, American horror fiction, in my opinion, all roads lead to Lovecraft. And again, that's a very like Lovecraftian worldview to have as a writer. And I think that he's unique, King's unique exactly for that reason. What happened to this character? And I've heard him say that too. And I think that we give a little glimpse into that here in our own way. Also staying true to the nature of the monster.
I am just now thinking about Georgie sitting at a Thanksgiving table with like a table full of food, and him, him asking like, "Hey, could somebody please pass the squash?" And someone saying, "Well, Georgie, it's right next to you," and it being on his right side, and him just sort of going, "Yeah." And we could have done that. We could have done that.
He would just be like on the wrong side of the Lazy Susan.
Exactly.
He's like not quite able to get it.
I kind of want to watch all of these things you're describing, but that is not this short. That's not what you guys did.
No, it's not.
This doesn't mean I don't want to watch it.
But you said this was casual. This is our podcast. Yes. We pay the taxes on this podcast, so we can fully explore. But I think, TMI. But yeah, I think what was interesting to me really about telling the story of Georgie is how you could also really tell the story of Sharon Dembrow, who features in the film as a character, and what the relationship with the grief of losing a child would be, which is another heavy King trope, from Pet Sematary. And it plays in this book too, obviously, but he's really kind of like talked about that a lot. And I wanted to zero in on that. And then, to me, Bob Gray, Pennywise the Clown, whatever, I mean, whatever name you give the trickster, he's also a boggart, where he takes the shape of what you fear, that kind of thing. And all of those like trickster components of that character have always been really fascinating to me. It wasn't until later adulthood and taking, comparative religion classes and studying mythology that I was really able to contextualize the trickster and what value it had in storytelling. And I think that Pennywise is crafted so expertly as the trickster and like that boggart kind of feel, that I love that about this character. And I really wanted to do something with Pennywise because it's so like ambitious or maybe like naive to even assume that we could touch the character.
Well, and there's a creative freedom too. I mean, Pennywise could be anything.
Exactly.
There are references to Jaws in the book. I mean, he could literally be whatever your fear is. You're afraid of sharks, or it's so in that way you have a blank landscape, and you can just there are rules, but there are not rules, and you can just kind of go with it. And so that's pretty liberating from a creative standpoint.
It really is, and then it's also very intimidating from a no budget filmmaking standpoint.
Right.
And so I think we had to get really creative in the writing process and then in the execution in the final cut to figure out how to get that. And I think with the tools that we had, we ended up delivering what I think was probably the best case scenario for the budget that we had as far as how to get there. So, just from a filmmaker's perspective, I think that we really did something unique there. And I'm happy with how our interpretation of Pennywise evolved. And to me, that was one of the big questions was, can we stick this? Like, that was the thing that kind of, for lack of a better term, kept me up at night, worrying about how the movie would turn out in the end and what people's reactions would be. An insane amount of work went into this short film. And it was very plotted and very meticulously thought through. And I feel really good now that we're a little bit away from having rendered the final cut to say that we did okay, I think, and I hope people dig it.
Well, film's subjective, but as long as you guys, as long as at the end of the day you're like, this is my vision has realized as close as possible. I stand by this. That's all you can really do as a creative, I think. Switching gears to what people think of it, the film has had a few screenings so far at 5 and at this point it'd be 6 by the time you hear this, 6 different film festivals, premiering at the Boston Underground Film Festival. So why don't you guys go into a little bit what that was like?
Go ahead, John. Talk about Boston Underground.
Boston Underground was great. For me, obviously, I'm from the Boston area, for those who don't know, which is probably everybody. So I had a lot of friends and colleagues and stuff there. And I think, over the years, I've sort of developed more of a reputation of being someone that's more in the documentary world. And so I think to have some kind of narrative fiction presented was sort of different for people, and they probably weren't quite sure what to expect. But the feedback so far has been positive. I haven't really heard much from the other festivals that it's played at, but in terms of Boston, people were impressed with what we were able to do. Given a small budget and given that there was almost no dialogue, they thought it was very well done, and they thought it was spooky, and the atmosphere. Everything they said to us was kind of what we were shooting for. So it's been rewarding in that way. I think the big test will be, once it's sort of released to the world via Fangoria, and we see, especially with like a lot of the Stephen King purists and the diehard constant readers and all those folks have to say about it. I think that'll be the kind of the true test. But sort of touching on what you were just saying before, James, that like, just really quickly, I think, and especially for anybody that's listening, that whether you write articles or you make films or you whatever, regardless of the feedback, or regardless of whether you captured your ultimate vision on screen or not, there's something to be said for finishing a project. And I think that whoever you are, whatever you're working on, whatever sort of artistic medium you're in, I think having the ideas is really not the hard part. It's sort of like figuring out how to do it and then taking it to the finish line and doing it and making a thing and being, and that's the hard part. And so I'm proud of that. I'm proud of what we did and what's on the screen, but I'm also proud that we were able to finish it. And I think anybody that's making something should feel that way, seeing it through. And so for me, that's a big takeaway. But in terms of feedback, it's been good so far.
In Boston, I learned how to say Harvard.
Yeah, there's definitely regionalisms that we, introduce Ryan to. We don't like our R's around here. But yeah, it's been good so far.
I'm resisting continuing the accent. I was going to say something, but
well, it was interesting while we're diverging from the path here. It was interesting to me as a Texan with no accent to go to Boston where, not a ton of people had that accent. And I don't know if they're transplants or what, but what it drove home for me was just kind of, stereotyping and kind of all that stuff, as always it's just bogus. I think that with regard to the feedback that people have given from it, there's just been so many cool like people that are either close to the King mythos or, have worked with King. Larry D. Cohen, said some nice things about the script and the final cut, and he wrote the teleplay along with several other things that are noteworthy. But just that kind of stuff for me as a consumer of information and media, and I would say somebody who's read Mr. Mercedes as well as it, and a constant reader, really, to follow King's work and to have somebody that did adapt it once and quite successfully and masterfully even. To even get any feedback like that, that was pretty cool. And then I think the ultimate feedback for me thus far with regard to like the Fangoria stuff is the fact that they were willing to, put their name behind it and get it out there for people to watch. That to me says a lot. And yeah. So that was kind of the thing that I was most impressed with so far through the process, was just kind of hearing from some of the industry people that have been close to this stuff, saying nice things, and then to have Fangoria ultimately come in and get involved was just mind blowing.
Well, let's talk about our pals at Fangoria a little bit and dive down that hole a little bit more, because that's something that just to be involved with Fangoria, the oldest running horror publication of all time, that doesn't really back too many things, like just say, hey, we're gonna. How many horror shorts come out a year? Like, and Fangoria's not, saying, hey, let's put it out. So I guess if there was any fear that while you're making it to be like, I don't know if people are going to be well received, I can't think of a bigger stamp of approval.
Right. And that's
besides Stephen King, I guess that would be the biggest stamp of approval.
Yeah, I mean, but from a media standpoint, yeah. I mean, in my opinion, you're pretty spot on. Fangoria is really unique in that they are coming back after a lapse in publishing, and I think everything about that company is really cool right now. Like the fact that they're staying print and sending you magazines. They took the black bag away, which I get, but that was cool. And just the fact that they're still just advocates for the genre is really cool. And as far as putting our film versus any other film out there, what I think is happening is the publishers and people in that industry are acknowledging their platform, and they're acknowledging their ability to bring out content that otherwise might not get large play. And I think that you'll see more and more of this, and I'm glad.
For sure.
And I would also say to, other filmmakers, reach out to publications, reach out to, social media influencers in a given genre or, space that you're trying to play in, and try to build those connections and have them, participate in the process. Content is king. So at the end of the day, people want to put things out there, and if it has the merit, then it makes sense. And I really like the possibility of groups like Fangoria and other people in that space, in horror specifically, helping independent filmmakers to get a larger audience. I think that's really cool.
For sure. And John, do you want to kind of expand on your thoughts on being involved with Fangoria on this one?
Yeah, no, I mean, to echo Ryan, I mean, I agree with everything that he's saying, and I think that they're in a rebranding phase, so to speak, and their content is king, and something I like to say to Ryan all the time, and I say to other people, is that like the answer is always no if you don't ask, right? And so I think through some of my other documentaries that I've been working on, I've been lucky enough to sort of make a lot of contacts with people in the industry. And through the It documentary that I'm working on, have gotten to know Natasha over at Fangoria fairly well, and knew that she was a filmmaker, and thought maybe they would be interested in playing ball and giving Georgie a platform. And so reached out, and not to oversimplify it, but I mean, it was as simple as that. And of course, Georgie had to be a good piece of work in order for them to want to, collaborate in this way. But that's kind of how it happened. And so, we're in an interesting era where we're connected in a way that we never have been before. And so utilizing those connections and thinking outside the box and trying to collaborate and it's really the name of the game, especially with a short film like this, where there's no clear, there's no real distribution market. There's not a ton of monetary value. There's nothing that you can really do with it except get it in front of people and see what kind of life it takes. So, I mean, I'm psyched that Fangoria was interested, and happy to have them.
Happy to be had.
Happy to be had.
Yes.
By them.
It goes both ways, but yeah, for sure.
Yeah, a lot of having and having going all around. So, and and I think I'm excited to have Georgie on such a wide platform, just to get it out there. And who knows how people are going to react to it. Obviously, we want people to like the things that we do as creatives, but I like to make and be involved in things that are impactful. So even if people don't like it, as long as it stayed with them, that's the most important thing to me, and I think Georgie will do that to anyone that watches it for even a short film, and I could be very objective as I wasn't really hands on the filmmaking process of this film, so I could say as a not I saw it evolve, but it wasn't my baby. Basically, so I could say, looking on the outside a little bit, that the imagery, the cinematography, the performances, the music, the visual effects, it's all comes this perfect recipe that is just a huge smack in the face that is, I don't think it can be ignored personally, and I'm really proud of what you guys accomplished getting it all together with the costumes, every element of it. It really all came together. So
yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's cool, and I hope other people feel the same way. I want to zero in on a couple of those things that you just talked about. So like the music.
Yes.
Sideshow Sound Theater, who has worked with Creepy Kingdom on the last several projects we've put out. They're awesome. And I love Will and Wendell. We actually just started a band, which is pretty cool. I think Creepy Kingdom will probably put that music video out here pretty soon for the title song from Georgie, or the credits song.
We'll get into the song, and the song will be out by the time this is out as well. But we're going to play the song at the end of this podcast, so that's why I was going to ask you a little bit more about the song.
Okay, well, first of all, let's dig into Will and Wendell. They really worked diligently with me to what I think is execute a score that was not derivative of Richard Bellis, but transformative, and it had some derivative components. Obviously, we wanted to make some nods, so there are definitely some synths that are being used that were extrapolated from what we understand he was using on the score for the original miniseries, and the tonal quality really brings you back to Derry, and I think that was pretty sweet, and really in a film that's an art house film with no dialogue, basically. The music is a huge component, and as it gets where it's going, the film itself, as it kind of moves along, there are some opportunities to do some fairly bizarre things with music, and they really nailed it. And the way we did it was kind of cool, because they normally write as a duo, basically weaving in and out of each other.
Okay. And
what we did on this film was we broke Will Dodson into the more traditional classic, symphonic score, and had him kind of marry in those kind of Bellis elements to establish the location and the universe. And then we had Wendell Jones down in Mexico City, who is his partner, really focus on that really heavy abstract and bizarre kind of stuff. And so that played very well. And then to add into the mix further, there's a sequence in the film which will really pop out, and I'm not going to tell you what it is, but there you go, it'll pop out. And that was designed by a guy named Kevin Gamble, who I've been working with for years on a variety of projects. And he did all the sound design for the film, and then he did the score for this one scene that really sticks out. And so we had 3 different people doing the score with 3 unique voices that really broke the acts of the film, in my opinion, into really bite-sized chunks. And you never really notice a jarring sensibility with it. It all flows really well. And so a lot of attention to detail went into the sound design and the score on this. Lots of back and forth emails and calls and getting stuff right. And they were really diligent about it and very creative, and kind of with minimal abstract direction and some follow-up did something pretty cool. And I think for them, they kind of said it was like a dream, because they don't have to compete with the dialogue and get ducked under the audio level, not to get too technical, but the music will usually sit under the dialogue. So the music got to be kind of a star here too. The VFX were done by Josh Wells.
Oh, before we jump to VFX, I just want to comment on Sideshow. Yeah. So I think that they're incredible. I've been loving working with them. I've said this on other podcasts. Other people might have, if you haven't heard, they scored Foolish Mortals, which was an incredible experience for me working with them, because Well, basically, I gave them one note, and I said I wanted the opening theme to be reminiscent of Tales from the Crypt. That was the only thing I said, and what they delivered just completely blew my mind. Like, it was still original, it still had its own feel, it still fit Foolish Mortals, but it still gave me that feeling of that POV going into the house when I was a kid. Like, and they were able to capture that in their music, and then of course they did I Hate Halloween, which very similar music style. And so my thought with them was like, okay, that's what they do. But when they delivered what they delivered for Georgie, it's nothing like I've ever heard from them before.
Right. That's a great statement.
Yeah.
It really wasn't. And they sunk their teeth into it. The thing about Sideshow Sound is that they do that, that they fit in the same space as Creepy Kingdom, where it's like accessible horror, for lack of a better term, where it's just like spooky stuff that the whole family can enjoy. And they took this opportunity to do something different, and I thought really stuck it. And it was out of the box for them. But if you actually listen to like their podcast, and they have a podcast, and they put up a bunch of YouTube videos, they analyze scores from all over the place, and they can unpack all these different things, so that their scope is really wide. And I'm also really excited to be doing this band with them, because they have like just infinite music knowledge. I mean, they're super talented, and they play all over the place. So I mean, like the song that's at the end that you'll play, it was like we were going for like Circus Clowns meets Perturbator. And they did a great job.
Everyone's going for that these days.
Oh yeah.
When you come over to my house, that's what you're playing. But I think that's that, to speak to their credit, yeah, they were just phenomenal. Always have been, and I expect to continue to work with them on pretty much anything I can get them on.
Yay. Okay, so VFX. Let's talk about those.
Yeah.
Because this is the first Creepy Kingdom VFX move thing, right? I mean, besides the...
No, we did a full-scale 3D modeling in Foolish Mortals.
Of course, that I meant over shot footage.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, I Hate Halloween had some more titly kind of stuff, but yeah, this was definitely the most involved effects components that Creepy Kingdom have had in a movie. Besides, I mean, that's it. Yeah. But so Josh Wells really kind of led the charge on that, with regard to processing like the paper boat, with regard to some of those things that were a little bit more nuanced and tricky. And we had some help, but I mean, for the most part, he was very much in that seat. And I think that the way they turned out, again, for no budget and crunch time and all this, was really impressive. I will say that the most difficult thing that I've been involved with from a post-production standpoint was getting the paper boat in the paper boat sequence in this to work. That is a super challenging thing, because it's paper folding in 3D space, basically origami. And there's a couple of manipulations towards the end of making a paper boat by hand that to recreate in the 3D space was really difficult to get right. But in the end, it turned out fantastic. I like the textures. Everything that we did really, kind of pops out. And I think that, visually, there's a lot happening in this movie. There's a lot happening in that short space. And then also, we had another artist and VFX guy working on the short called Justice Biggert. He did the sequence that will pop out and blow your mind. He did that alone.
Say his name again.
Justice Biggert.
There we go. Yeah.
Biggart. And he's responsible for this one scene in the film that everybody's going to like, I think. And he turned it around about 30 days, working kind of straight on it. And it was really impactful, and he did a great job. And I think that piece really complemented the film insanely well. Other notable people on this would be DP Asher Vast, who I work with quite a bit on commercial film too, and he's great. It's a great partnership. You know, he doesn't direct on top of you. He lets you get the shot the way you want it and gives you the time, buys you the time. Also buying me time was Coral Untalan, who was the assistant director for the short, and I work with her on a bunch of different things. And she's, you know, what it came down to in the end with the crew was everybody was in it for the long haul. We shot the interiors, 26-hour shoot total, I think, and straight.
Wow.
And so we really had to take the time to meticulously kind of craft the images and stuff. And
wait. Let's think about it. You said 26 hours straight?
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah, we did.
Let's take
we
a
did
beat
feed
and
people.
take that in. Yeah, I know. Let's take a beat and take that in.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it was
Wow.
it was pretty wild. But those folks buying us time to get it right and not rushing the process. It's such a huge component of how you get good images and how you tell good stories with a camera, is taking the time to get it right. And the actors, you know, they were great, of course. Also on the they make it happen, but also on the crew was Amelia Zabrak, and she did the prosthetic and makeup. And she worked really hard in pre-production with me. We were looking at photos of sausages that were all rotted and all sorts of crazy things to get fleshy looks. And, you know, I mean, she's just all over the place in the film with her makeup, and she helped out with the wardrobe a great deal. And was one of the only people besides me to get, you know, up close and personal with Tony, who played Georgie, Tony Dakota, in the pre-production process to really get the makeup right. And I think that she stuck it, and it looks super good, and everything she did really plays. And so we just had this really incredible crew, and I'm not mentioning I think we had 30 odd people on the crew. So I'm not mentioning a lot of them, but they all did great. And it was a really awesome team effort. And when you shoot for 26 hours straight, it's mind numbing. But it's for especially if you're not like super actively in a role that's like constantly moving, it's mind numbing. And they pretty much all stuck it out to the end. So it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of people that know, it's like being on set. It's the game I call the hurry up and wait game for most people. But
Absolutely.
But they got to be on deck the second they're needed. So, you know,
and present and attentive
Yeah.
and thinking outside the box. And once you start getting past about 12 hours on a shoot, people really start falling off. And so that was like, you know, the whole back half of the shoot. And the way we structured it was some of the more visually challenging stuff was shot first for that reason. I think, you know, there's one sequence in the film where where there's balloons and all this, and we were in those frames for probably about 6 hours, straight, just grinding it out and trying to get it right. But yeah, it was really cool. It was I look back on that one as a really great day, even though it was super long. That's why you kind of do this stuff, you know.
well, that's why we do anything, right? So we can look back and say, what a sweet time that was, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as far as crew recognition goes, I guess I do want to say that if anybody's listening and I didn't mention your name, I still love you, still super grateful. But there were so many people that it's a bit overwhelming. But we have an awesome crew here in Seattle, and all of these people I work with pretty regularly. And I think that it shows on screen, you know, the continuity and all that stuff just really, really pops. And without them, it wouldn't happen.
Well, we all know, everyone involved in filmmaking knows that filmmaking is a thankless job.
Yeah. Get used to that.
No, but obviously, you know, everyone that came together, not even just the crew, from the crowdfunding portion of this that made it happen financially, and was incredible. I don't think we ever directly did a podcast about it. We talked about it on podcasts, but we even had like lots of cool things for the crowdfunding campagn.
John pretty much spearheaded all of that.
Yeah,
those are more people to thank, right? I mean, you know, Zachary Jackson Brown did the poster for Georgie, and was patient and did many drafts, many iterations, and down to just play ball and kick around ideas. Shane Murphy, who runs a company called Theater of Creeps out of Worcester, Massachusetts, he does some of the best horror enamel pins and prints and original artwork that you can get. Donated his time and money to have some great pins made up for us. And so, you know, there were a lot of people that
Ben Scrivens.
Ben Scrivens of Fright Rags,
Yeah.
another example of somebody that, was committed to helping a no budget project and independent filmmakers tell a story and throw his company, his brand behind it, and get some T-shirts made. And so, there were so many people that stepped up to the plate and either donated their time, their resources, or both to help us, raise the funds that we needed to get this made. So, Ryan likes to say teamwork makes the dream work. And I mean, if this isn't a definition of that, I don't know what is. So
100%. John, I don't know about you, but like when I got my Fright Rag shirt in the mail back from, the crowdfunding campaign, I was like, wow, like that's really cool. Like as a horror nerd, having a Fright Rag shirt for Georgie is another one of those like kind of really cool instances that came out of this. So that was awesome. There were just so many of those. The pins are great. I'm looking at them right now. I mean, all of it really did click. And
I don't think I got a T-shirt, so I can't relate to you on that one. But the pin was rad, and I love the pin. And just to sort of have something that you worked on, and have a tangible sort of like, piece of merchandise that's tethered to that project. That's yours in the sense of, this story. It was really gratifying. It was really cool.
What's cool about the merch that was created is that they're just kind of cool on their own without context. Like especially the pin. Yeah. The pin's just a cool pin if you don't know what exactly it's supposed to be from. But yeah, just, to have so many people support us making the film without any real proof of anything, right? Because, a few storyboard images, some concept art, it definitely puts gas in the tank, I'd imagine, and wanting to deliver something for the people that believed in you early on and supported, especially the backers, particularly, who are just blindly, contributing just because they're excited about the idea.
Sure.
So this whole time of filmmaking is really awesome because, in my opinion, because we're really able to kind of cut out the middleman here and make stuff for people with the help of those people. Like, it's an incredible time.
And I think the people that, that back these projects, like, I think as someone that has backed other similar projects, right, in the past, like, I think there's like a sincerity behind the people making this kind of content that, like, the people that are supporting it, they understand that, like, that we're really just one of them, and that we care about this stuff and we're interested in it, and we're doing it to just put out more creative stuff in the world and leave some interesting things behind, and not to get too philosophical about it, but I mean, that's really what it is. And I think that people, they can see through, and like, I think that they see that there's a genuine interest and like a genuine passion for this stuff. And I think that it makes it easier for people to jump on board and say, yeah, I want to support this, or I want to be a part of it in some way. And I definitely felt that way to a large extent with Georgie.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's always cool when you do these crowdfunding things to see people get engaged. And you just hope that you can fulfill their needs the way you're supposed to and do all that stuff, because you're not a shipping warehouse, you're a filmmaker. And so you want to make sure that, those things are done well. And but the fact that people rally behind things in an age where there's so much saturation and people vying for their attention and dollars and bandwidth, it's like super humbling, and I feel the same as John, like, as somebody that plays with, trying to support other artists, it's I'm sure a lot of the people that played on this were, other artists, so thanks to them for making it happen.
For sure. So one other element we haven't dove in. Is that a new word?
Doved.
We haven't doved in.
Doved, yeah.
I like doved.
We haven't doved in yet. Is the performances of the actors.
Oh, those
in
guys.
the film. Yeah. So why don't we talk a little bit about, as we round home base here, what the intention was before, and how it turned out, I guess, from your guys' perspective.
John, what are your thoughts?
I guess I'll just say that, I think because we did, for Meredith's part, Sharon Denbrough, we did more of a traditional casting call, and so Ryan and I got to see, some tapes from her, and so I think we kind of knew more or less what we were going to get from Meredith. I mean, I'm just speaking for myself here. Ryan may disagree. In terms of Tony, it was a little bit more of a question mark. He hadn't really, with the exception of doing the interview for the documentary, which was really just a straightforward talking head interview, he hadn't really acted or been particularly physical, especially on camera, in, quarter of a century. So I think we were not quite sure what he was going to deliver. And he had expressed some nervousness prior both to the interview for the documentary and also shooting Georgie. And so it was kind of a question mark, to say the least. And, he nailed it. He just brought it 100%. And so it was a pleasant surprise, but it was, somewhat of a surprise. So Ryan, and whatever you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think the cool thing about this with regard to Tony was that he had this anxiety about a few things. I think, getting back on camera was an anxiety for him. He has a great deal of mental toughness as a person. And the anxiety didn't overwhelm him. And he did just literally bring it. I think that's a great way to say it. Mm-hmm. And it was very cool as a director to work with someone who was so present. And you could tell that he had training as a child actor. And it was almost like riding a bike, I guess, for him, and the scenes where he had to, basically hit marks, replicate and duplicate movements because it was so physical, because we weren't letting him lean on dialogue as a crutch. He never speaks in the film. He was able to set and reset positions and hit marks pretty effortlessly. And it was really interesting to watch that. And I think that he has chops. And hopefully we get to see him in more things as time goes on. But I feel like he definitely brought it. Working with Ben Heller, who is, I think we just keep saying this every time we talk about Ben, he's like the world's greatest human. He really is. He's just the nicest person, the most professional person, sincere. There's so much right about that guy. Having him come out and shoot was really special. And got to know him and just have him in our lives, I think it's a really cool treat. He's a nice dude. And then Meredith.
I'll say before you run,
go ahead.
For people that don't know who Ben Heller is, you should elaborate a little bit.
Oh yeah. So Ben played Stan Uris in the 1990 miniseries Child Stan Uris, who I think, in a lot of ways had a really emotional and diverse role. As a child actor, that was a pretty emotional and diverse role. Mm-hmm. There was a lot going on with Stan's character. It's funny because now knowing him, and I rewatched the miniseries not too long ago, and I really realized that he had a great deal of range as a kid, and he still does as an adult. He's very humble, he's very quiet, but he really has a lot of range. So I think that it was just a pretty cool experience to work with him. And I think you may see more in the future. But I think that with Meredith, Meredith was, for me, one of those castings where it was like, she's not a bit player, because in a lot of ways, I feel like this story, this art house film is one of those things where you're going to tie a meaning to it however you like. One of the meanings or associations that I've given to this story is the relationship that parents have with their children. And in particular, the way mothers disassociate from, the child. And there is some slight Oedipal connotations to this movie as well. But for her, I was really convinced that she would be able to deliver a good performance in a genre film, because I'd seen her in other genre films. She was in a movie called Beloved Beast that is pretty interesting. Was also shot here in Seattle, feature length, crazy feature length. Which if you haven't seen it, might be worth checking out. She had a great role in that, and so I knew her from other stuff. And when she sent in her tape, her first tape, we were kind of like, yeah, I see it. And then we asked her to send in a second tape. And when she sent in the second tape with very basic direction via email and a phone call, she nailed it. And it was just like, okay, she's going to be able to do this. And there were so many instances on set with Meredith where she would tie in, she was very method, and she would like go and hang out and really, try to get into character and then come in and shoot her scenes. We were also shooting in her house, by the way, so kudos to her for allowing that to even happen. But Absolutely. She really nailed the stressed physicality of that look, and the idea that your a vision of your deceased child is back in your space. It's not easy to sell. It can easily look cheesy and be ruined. And she took direction very well, and kind of got ran over the coals. And a lot of her stuff on the interiors was shot towards the end of that 26-hour day. Oh. So by the end of it, it was like a little Kubrick kind of method where she was just beaten up and emotionally there because she's an actor. And I think she played really well too. And obviously she doesn't have the it connection that the other two guys have, but I think she stands on her own. I think
Absolutely.
I think she really works well in the movie.
Yeah, I think, and again, for non-dialogue performances, a lot. It's all in the physical and the expressions and
right,
and all that stuff, and everyone delivered on that, which is I think hard to accomplish. So. This has just been a stew with all the perfect seasonings and just these perfect amount of measurements to make a perfect.
It's a delicious casserole.
Yes.
Casserole.
So as we round up, the last thing I want to talk about is the song. But before that, I want to give a little bit of spotlight on the things that you've worked on in the past, John, and which. It's just so our listeners know a little bit. Your documentary work.
Yeah. So my first documentary was about Stephen King's Pet Sematary. It's called Unearthed and Untold, and was an indie doc that came out in 2017 via Terror Films digitally, and Synapse Films put it out on Blu-ray. You can find it on iTunes and Amazon and all that good stuff. And we're now in post-production on our latest documentary about Stephen King's It, called Pennywise, the Story of It. And we dropped an extended trailer back in February for that. And that'll be out later this year. Those are the two major things. Yeah.
Well, those are some pretty big things. So right on.
And for anybody who hasn't seen the Pet Sematary doc, it's very well done. And when I was first kind of getting into looking to, work with John and stuff, I always try to watch what people have done just to kind of get a bead for where they're at in the process. And as a documentarian, very, very good. And that documentary had a lot of cool stuff that if you're into that movie, you're going to need to see that if you haven't.
No. Yeah. Thanks, man. Yeah. We were, that was a 2-man project, and we kind of put the cart before the horse a little bit in that we were Justin White and I, who was my colleague on that, we were doing research about the locations of that film. Basically, the genesis of that documentary is looking at the film and where it was shot in Maine and the local impact it had on people in Maine, because it was Stephen King's first film that was shot in Maine. They're all set in Maine, but this was actually shot in Maine. And so we were doing research sort of just on our own as fans. And before we knew it, we sort of had what looked like the beginnings of a documentary. So we just sort of took it to the finish line, and it took about 4 years to make. And so it was, we're proud of it for that reason, that it was kind of just like, boots on the ground, 2 guys just sort of grinding it out. And so it was, again, kind of speaking back to what I was saying earlier, is sort of, we were just glad that it got finished at all, because there were so many opportunities for it to not get finished or to just sort of give up and be done with it. But we're proud of that one. And so we'll see.
I really love it. Yeah. Pennywise is going to be amazing. And just even being able to play a small part in helping that thing happen with the shoot here in Seattle, pretty. It's going to be a very cool documentary, and if you haven't seen the trailer for that, definitely go and check it out because wow.
So where can you see the Pet Cemetery doc? Where's that available?
Yeah, so you can pick that up on Blu-ray on Amazon or the Synapse website, or you can watch it. You can stream it on iTunes, Amazon Prime, Hulu. It's kind of it's on Shudder. You can stream it on Shudder. It's pretty accessible if you just Google it. It should pop up. Yeah.
And so and how are people going to be able to see Pennywise?
Yeah, so the Pennywise one, we'll have a Blu-ray release as well. We're still looking into sort of more larger distribution. We've got our Blu-ray and DVD fulfillment that we'll owe, the backers to the Indiegogo. But after that, we plan on making it available digitally and home video as well and Blu-ray DVD. So yeah, we'll be sure to promote that once we know. We'll have pre-orders available for that probably later this summer. And like I said, it'll be out into the world before the end of the year. So,
and we'll be sure to plug that on Creepy Kingdom when the time comes.
Oh yeah, there'll be more info. I just wanted, in case people were interested, just to plant the seed in their head on how they can watch it when it's available.
Yeah, well that's a good seed, and we'll be sure to water it later in the year.
Right on. Great. All right. So let's last but not least here, let's talk about the song that Ryan wrote with Sideshow. What is the name of this new joint musical project?
Right now, we're calling it the Doomy Gloomies.
Okay.
And it's fun. The songs that song Cupcake had a very personal meaning to it for me, and I wrote it and wrote the music, and I was gonna do it with this Irish dirge band, and we sent it over to a studio to let them know, hey, this is roughly what we're coming in to track. Well, when we sent it over there, this gal got a hold of it. Her name's Eva Stokes, and she picked it up somehow, and then I got this email back. I was out of town, and I got this email back on the road that was like, here's your song, better than you did it before, basically. And so I scrapped the idea of singing it myself, handed it over to her, and then it became more of this kind of dance song. So we enacted Sideshow to come in and take a stab at it, and they nailed it. And it's a great song. The video was directed by a guy named John Robinson, who I'm friends with. I produced it with him and his partner, Eric, and they just did a fantastic job. And Eva stars in the video along with a gentleman named Russell, who works with me in the entertainment business, and he's a ghost in the video. And it was a really cool kind of side, it's just like a really cool byproduct of Georgie, working together and all that. So pretty cool. Pretty excited to put some music out there.
Awesome. This seems like all in all, this has been on all levels a complete creative outlet for you.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. Yeah, it's kind of touched at least all the places I'm worth being creative at. I think that it allows to play that way. But I think music and film for me, they go hand in hand. Like I can't imagine not being really close to the music on a film. And it just so happened that when I was really putting the screws to finishing Georgie and playing in that space, that this song kind of came out of the background of it, and so it's all interrelated and really interesting.
All right, so before we get out of here and play that song, right now you could watch Georgie. How can people do it? What is the elevator pitch for it?
Oh yeah, time to plug.
Yeah.
June 10th, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as I understand it.
Yes.
Which is 9 o'clock for those of us out here on the Best Coast.
West Side is the best side.
For sure. And
we lost
is
John, because John would have probably had a comment. John had to go, so he says goodbye to everyone.
Yeah, John had to get back to real life, so we're gonna claim West Side. But yeah, so anyway, that will happen on June 10th, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And, they're going to have it for 48 hours. And then I think that after that, we've got some really interesting plans for how to give it a forever home, and we'll see what plays out and keep everybody updated as that stuff manifests. But this is kind of a pinnacle moment for Georgie, really. So I hope everybody watches it, and I hope everybody enjoys it. And if you don't enjoy it, tell James, not me. Because I'm sensitive.
He's sensitive. Yeah, let me know. But anyone listening at this point, thanks for listening. If you're just checking us out just because you're a Georgie fan, that's awesome. But particularly, I want to thank the Creepy Kingdom followers, listeners, whatever people, the citizens of the Creepy Kingdom who support all of our endeavors, no matter what we do, podcasts, films, clothing lines, whatever. We're doing this stuff because we love it, and we want to provide awesome stuff for like-minded people.
Yeah,
and
agreed.
That's the fuel in my gas tank every day. So I'm very excited to get Georgie out there. And in fact, this was seedling of idea entered your brain less than a year ago, and now here we are. It's exciting. So
yeah, it is. And again, thank you, to everybody listening.
Happy Georgie Day!
Yay!
All right, here's Cupcake. Kind of like here's Johnny. Got it.
Here's Johnny.
I got these holes in the sheets where your eyes used to be, in the palm and in the pine. I put your memory away in a place it would stay, or at least I know I tried. I still feel your ghost when it's quiet. I can feel you under my skin, closer than I've ever been. When it's quiet, somehow I still feel you. I put these words on the page instead of a grave, feasting on your shadow. I light a candle each day, knowing better than to pray for the ones already gone. I still feel your ghost when it's quiet. I can feel you under my skin, closer than I've ever been. When it's quiet, somehow I still feel you. I still feel your ghost when it's quiet. I can feel you under my skin, closer than I've ever been. When it's quiet, somehow I still feel you. The sun sets on us all, the way the leaves bring the fall. There is beauty in decay. The dream wants to crawl, wants to wash over us all. I'm not sure I'm ready. I cut these holes in the sheets where your eyes used to be, in the palm and in the pine.
All right, so June 12th, 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. And if you're in another time zone, you have to do the math, sorry. But that is when Georgie will no longer be available on Fangoria. There will be other screenings if you're listening to this way after that point. But if it's still that point, then please check it out by going to Fangoria's social media accounts. You can also go to Creepy Kingdoms because, of course, we're linking back to that as well. And if you want to contact us here at the Cinema Crypt podcast, you can do so by emailing us, creepykingdom@gmail.com. And for all things Creepy Kingdom, our articles, our reviews, to check out our shop, links to our social media, check out other podcasts, all that fun stuff is just sitting there waiting for you at creepykingdom.com. And lastly, if you want to support what we do here at Creepy Kingdom and check out some exclusive bonus content, then check out our Patreon. That's patreon.com/creepykingdom. That's where our Patreon exclusive, podcast, Live from the Dungeon lives. That is currently where our documentary on Haunted Mansion fans, Foolish Mortals, lives online. The clock is ticking on that, by the way. It is going to be leaving Patreon very soon. So if you've been waiting, it's like, oh, I'll check it out later. Well, now is the time. Just go to patreon.com/creepykingdom. All right, now it's time to close the crypt.